Hey guys, SunDownRider here. This is going to be my chapter review to Nanatsu no Taizai 267 and 268 from the heavens, and then I think the other one's called From Purgatory. Both good chapters, but let's start with 267. This was a really good chapter, as has been the case for with Nakaba for months now, spitting that hot fire all over the place. And actually, I forgot to mention last time in my last review, but the month of Ramadan has started, so Muslims worldwide are going to be fasting from sunrise to sundown. Sundown, and that's basically it. We just don't eat and drink in between that time, and then from sundown to sunrise again, there's a long prayer we have to do during the night. But that's all well and good. So just to let you guys know, Ramadan has started. But in regards to this chapter, we start with an awesome color page of Estarossa choking Elizabeth out, with Elizabeth desperate not to die so that she can see Meliodas at least one more time. We then go to an awesome color spread of Meliodas and Ban, which I thought was pretty cool. Ban's wearing something very different to what he usually wears. He's got some sort of like leopard print thing going in a different color. So we then go back to the Estarossa Elizabeth fiasco, with Elizabeth placing a hand on Esterossa's face and magically slapping this guy back into the Edo period. He got whooped. Like, this was such a dirty slap. I mean, like, she doesn't actually motion a slap, but she just touches his face, and then, like, I don't know whatever magical ability she used, whether it was like minute arcs or something on her hand, they just all exploded on his face. And it was such an awesome panel, because we know that Elizabeth can pack quite a punch. She just prefers not to, and I actually like it when she shows what she can do. So while Estarossa is on the floor, like, thinking over his life choices, Elizabeth recognizes where she has been taken, an old goddess theatre referred to as Heaven's Theatre. Now, it looks exactly like you would imagine a Greek theatre would have looked like, but in major disrepair. So actually a lot like a lot of Greek theatres that you'd see today, in major disrepair, but with the exact same design. And Elizabeth reminisces on how she used to meet Meliodas at the theatre, as no one else used to visit the place because of its disrepair, and because no one actually used to frequent it. So at this point in time, Estarossa seems to have regained his sanity for a moment, saying that he remembers he was always watching. And then we kind of cut off and we go to Stigma again. So back at Stigma, who's led by Hauser, we're told that Hauser is going to continue with his forces south, battling the demons along the way, whilst King, Sariel, and Tarmiel prepare to leave to save Elizabeth. King says his goodbyes to Diane. She's obviously concerned for him, but he's interrupted when Derriere says that she will join the trio in their attempt to save Elizabeth and defeat Estarossa. So Sariel and Stigma, and Tarmiel to an extent, he didn't actually say anything, but you assume he agrees with Sariel. They respond with disdain, saying that there's nothing in it for Derriere. There's no reason why she would want to rescue Elizabeth or defeat Estarossa, apart from, the fact that she witnessed Monspeed die, and that nobody trusts her enough to allow her to accompany them on such a mission. Now, at this point, King interrupts and says that he trusts Derriere based off of Elizabeth protecting her and Monspeed 3,000 years ago, which was what he saw in that kind of mini arc where he and Diane went into the past 3,000 years ago, right in the middle of the war. So his knowledge of this event shocks Derriere, obviously, because he wasn't alive then, making apparent her reason for wanting to help Elizabeth. Really, it's more she wants to just kind of pay her back for everything she's done since the war 3,000 years ago. So I think it's a nice gesture to make. So with that, we've got a 4-man squad going after Elizabeth, and the squad is pretty powerful. And then again, you have to consider Estarossa bodybagged all of them just a few moments ago. So we'll see how this plays out. But I think that maybe now that the 4-man squad knows how powerful Estarossa is and how dangerous he can be, but they'll play it safe. They'll think up of a strategy to really effectively counter Estarossa. So we'll see how that goes. We then go back to Heaven's Theatre, where Estarossa tells Elizabeth that he was always watching her, and he has always been watching her. It's creepy, but he meant it in a kind of non-creepy way. He's always like, I've got my eye on you, and that kind of thing. So at this point, Elizabeth remembers a little bit about Estarossa, and it's taken her a while to like jog her memory. Like, come on, man. It's like, but she says that he was always alone, always with a sad, lonely expression on his face. And at this point, you kind of feel bad for Estarossa, especially when he continues to talk of how he was born without the power of darkness, and he was laughed at behind his back because of how weak he was. He couldn't even beat a single insect, something like that, kill a single insect. And especially as the Demon King's son, I think he's the second son of the Demon King. I think it's Meliodas. Esterossa and Zeldris. But especially as the Demon King's second son, every demon in existence would have known about him, especially at birth. They would have known who he was. But for him to have been born without the power of darkness, it must have been a really tough time to grow up for Esterossa. So Esther then says that the only two people who never actually laughed at him were Meliodas and Elizabeth. And I thought this was really nice because Elizabeth is kind of too nice and too kind to laugh at anyone. She doesn't have that kind of pettiness within her. But Meliodas seemingly just believed in his brother. You know, no matter what happened, he just believed in his brother and was always there for his brother. That's what we got from this chapter. Even without the power of darkness, he believed in Esterossa, and he was like, "Don't worry, you got this. I believe in you." So I was like, that's a pretty nice thing for Meliodas to do, especially because he was like the pinnacle of power for the demons, and then you have someone on the reverse end of that who was kind of like the lowest tier demon in terms of not being born with the power of darkness. So Esther talks again of how at some point Elizabeth had caught his eye and his gaze was like forever fixed on her, but she was always looking towards Meliodas instead of him. And in this panel we see a Meliodas from 3,000 years ago, still the leader of the commandments we assume, but without his darkness and looking very much like the Meliodas we know today, or we have known since the beginning of the series, smiling warmly, and his eyes are clear of the demonic darkness and any malice that he usually shows in his Ten Commandments form. Which was quite surprising. I was just wondering, like, I'm pretty sure the high-level demons can turn on and off their darkness, but seeing Meliodas without his darkness while he's still a commandment is kind of, it's a weird sensation. You see him smiling and he's waving at Elizabeth, and you're just like, okay, that's pretty cool. So Elizabeth asks Esterossa to help her stop Meliodas at this point in time, while he laughs that she's still concerned about his brother, you know. And he then talks of how Meliodas would have been able to harness the power of the commandments that he's just absorbed, unlike himself, while listing Meliodas' qualities, almost like he's jealous of Meliodas, which essentially he is. You know, Meliodas has got the girl, he's got the power, he was born with the power, all that type of stuff. Let me just put my phone on silent. So he lists Meliodas' qualities such as strength, reliability, confidence, and Esterossa then tells us that Meliodas never abandoned him when he was younger. You know, he always protected him, was always there for him, even going so far as to tell him that if anything was on his mind or if anything concerned him, that he should talk to Meliodas about it. So Meliodas was an awesome older brother to Esterossa, and I'm wondering whether he ever shared that same bond with Zeldris, seeing as Zeldris is the youngest, and maybe he never got that chance. And now it turns out that Esterossa confided in Meliodas after Meliodas told him that you can tell me anything. So he confided in Meliodas about his feelings for Elizabeth all those years ago. Now, while he tells us this, his craziness starts to reawaken, and we're told that Meliodas told Esterossa that he would try to work things out between Esterossa and Elizabeth. So he was going to try and hitch them up, which is a bit of a shock, because Elizabeth seems fairly confident that Meliodas would never say anything like that. But it's not like Esterossa would just lie while spilling his guts. You know, he's kind of giving us his motivations here and why he's kind of going against Meliodas. But it's perfectly plausible to think that maybe his memory is a little bit broken. I mean, he is a little bit crazy, but perhaps there's more to this than meets the eye at this moment in time. What did Meliodas ever tell Esterossa, and who was actually gunning for Elizabeth? Was Meliodas trying to get Esterossa to hitch him up with Elizabeth, or was he kind of initially doing that and then he suddenly thought, ah shit, actually I love Elizabeth? Or was he never doing that in the first place, and maybe Esterossa just kind of thought this all up in his head? So Esterossa goes full apeshit with the darkness enveloping him and him losing his mind. Elizabeth realizes that the commandments are rejecting him, but also hears what seems to be a mental kind of telepathic plea from Esterossa to help him. So at this point in time, she tells him to throw up the commandments to maintain his focus and to will himself to remain sane. Now, I'm not sure if coughing up or throwing up the commandments is even possible right now, but we should assume that Elizabeth knows more about the commandments than we do, even though she was unaware that you could absorb multiple commandments. So maybe the same level of knowledge on the commandments, but I don't think you could throw up commandments. I mean, he didn't really ingest it orally anyway. He kind of just absorbed it via osmosis or some shit. So the darkness covers Esterossa's eyes and chest and the rest of his, like, from the belly button down, from the navel down, and then it also grips Elizabeth once more. And Esterossa then tells Elizabeth that if she's going to be stolen away by Meliodas, then she may as well be eaten by him, becoming his for eternity, which once again is kind of creepy, but I think he meant it in a good way. I don't think you can mean that in a good way. So in her most desperate moment, she once again just thinks only of Meliodas. We then go to Camelot Castle, where there's a huge kind of like blazing, well, not even blazing, it's this dark sun almost of it's just darkness surrounding the castle, and it's demonic darkness. It's the solid black, and within it Zeldaris talks to Cusack, telling him that Meliodas is absorbing the commandments without any negative effects. There's no hint of rejection. And we then see a huge cocoon with what looks like Meliodas' kind of demonic mark on the outside. It's kind of that sun kind of thing on his head. And within it, Meliodas rests, absorbing the commandments, whilst Elizabeth is on the verge of death. So an awesome chapter, but the thing to talk about here is, did this chapter kind of like just put up a whole bunch of death flags on Estarossa? And in my opinion, I don't think this is going to cause Estarossa to die, because then that would kind of take away one of the wild cards, the kind of antagonist at this moment in time. I think Estarossa is just going to continue to go full apeshit, go crazy, and he's going to become possessed by the commandments, and Meliodas will eventually have to put him down. But seeing as Meliodas said all those things to Estarossa when he was younger, I think Meliodas may just try and like beat him down and then obtain his commandments. But will Meliodas be done in time? So that was the end of that chapter. Moving on to chapter 268. So then we come to Nanatsu no Taizai chapter 268, which was called From Purgatory. Now, as soon as Purgatory was mentioned, I hope everyone knew exactly what was going to happen or who we were going to see, and this chapter was dope. We see this character on the front page described as a lone wolf. Now, I instantly thought, is that Ban? Just because, you know, we were in Purgatory, and I thought that's got to be Ban. But looking back, the creature actually looks very, very fox-like, even though it says a lone wolf. It looks very fox-like, and Ban is the fox's sin of greed, so, you know, that was pretty well telegraphed. So we see this fox-like creature in a fight against a slug-looking creature, and this fox wrecks the slug and then remembers being told about the Fountain of Youth. So then you see all these memories kind of flooding back in, and you realize that it is Ban. So the creature remembers Elaine, and then through that memory kind of sheds its exterior of darkness to once again become Ban. And it's here that we learn, on the side there's like a little note, there's a whole bunch of different notes in this chapter, that Escanor's glasses are not prescription. His eyesight is fine, and unlike Galtha's, who actually needs the glasses in order to see. Anyway, Ban's hair and his beard and his mustache have all grown literally to the ground, meaning he has spent possibly centuries in Purgatory so far. That's how long his hair is. It's the longest we've ever seen it. And he just stood there at the end, at the beginning of the chapter, after defeating said slug and regaining his memories, and he's shaken to the core about how close he came to losing his mind and becoming a permanent resident of Purgatory. So as he calls for Meliodas' emotions, wondering where the hell they are, his skin starts to burn and he coughs up blood, the consequences of entering Purgatory, but not really to any major effect on someone like Ban, seeing as he is immortal. So we see Ban journey through Purgatory. I liked this double spread. It just looked kind of cool. Talking to himself all the while, encouraging himself not to give up and to find Meliodas' emotions, and he's kind of arguing with himself and all that, and I really enjoyed that part. So he realizes he has no idea what the emotions will look like, what form they'll take. Will it look like a soul? Will it look like a body? Will it look like that slug? So he has a funny conversation with himself, very reminiscent of Jack Sparrow when he was in Davy Jones's locker. So I thought that was a nice, if it was in any way paying homage to that, I thought it was pretty cool. Now the obvious concern here is, when Ban returns to the normal world, will he be mentally stable upon return from Purgatory? That's the main concern. Now, personally, I think he may be fine, and the constant talking to himself is just because he's lonely. But you have to remember, he's been in Purgatory. His perception of time in Purgatory has been he's been alone for centuries, something which could drive someone insane, no matter how immortal you are. So he may come back with like a few quirky personality traits because of his enduring loneliness in Purgatory. So as he walks forward, the ground gives way beneath him, sending Ban plummeting down a mountainside, ending up a pile of broken bones in a pool of blood. Luckily for Ban, he's still immortal and quickly recovers from his slight tumble. Now, as Ban once again asks for Meliodas' emotions to show themselves, another creature just randomly appears, jumping off of the top of the mountain Ban just about fell off a few seconds ago, and crushing Ban in once again another pool of blood. Now, I didn't know the creature was Meliodas' emotions on first reading. I didn't think that, but looking back at it, it was pretty obvious. I mean, the creature, the darkness creature, let's call it for now, is in the form of a dragon, but not only that, it looks almost identical to Meliodas' key to the coffin of eternal darkness. You remember his original sword with the green hilt and the red ruby for the eye? It looks almost identical to the hilt of that sword. So here we find out, another side note, that Nakaba draws the manga during the night and day. He doesn't really have a preferred time. So going back to the story, Ban then does something very special whilst underneath this dragon, and he assumes this kind of his darkness form, that fox form once again. By the way, if you can hear quad bikes in the back, there's nothing really I can do about that. It's a hot day. People are just going to go ape. So Ban once again assumes his darkness fox form whilst underneath this dragon, only for it to dispel at the last second. Now, the fun part for me is, will this be a form that he'll be able to utilize once he returns to the normal world? Because that would be awesome if he just has this this darkness, demonic darkness kind of hybrid form. Because he is in fact still human, but if he had that kind of demonic side to him because of his extended stay in purgatory, that would be an awesome power up for Ban. And if he was able to also maintain sanity while doing that and maintain cognition, that would be an amazing power up for Ban. So Ban then dukes it out with this dragon, knocking it around until he gets his torso blown to pieces and blown actually away by the dragon's flames. Nakaba confirms here that, another side note, that Ban doesn't really protect the Fountain of Youth anymore, seeing as he has now essentially become the Fountain of Youth, which was pretty clear. It's happened in the anime now as well. Ban then, returning to the story, regenerates with his normal hairstyle and no beard and continues to fight. And we find out here on another side note that fairies as well as giants don't wear underwear and prefer to go commando. Good stuff. So Ban and the dragon continue to fight and beat each other down for quite a while. In fact, they do this for so long that Ban has essentially been battling for hundreds of years. He regrows his long hair and beard, suggesting that they've been fighting for decades. Not hundreds of years yet. They've been fighting for decades, and this is hyping me up so much because Ban has essentially been battling in purgatory itself for hundreds of years. We've seen him fight against that slug, definitely not the first of his enemies, and he's been fighting against this dragon that we've just seen in this chapter for at least a few decades. So he's been essentially fighting Meliodas for the last few decades now, with his hair having grown back out. So he's gonna get a major buff when he gets back, and I can't wait for that. So with the dragon and Ban both becoming bored of each other's presence, Ban falls asleep and reawakens with the dragon slumbering right against him and next to him, having apparently grown quite attached to him. So we find out here the difference between the City of the Dead and Purgatory. Another side note, the City of the Dead is where souls can rest in peace, whereas Purgatory is more like a prison for souls. Good stuff again. Ban sits against the dragon, returning to the story, reminding himself aloud that he needs to get back to Elaine and the friends who are waiting for him to return with Meliodas' emotions. As Ban speaks of returning to a woman precious to him, he hears something say, "Yeah, me too." And with this, the dragon behind him disappears, revealing a slumbering Meliodas behind him. Both of them are naked, by the way. Ban's naked throughout the whole thing, but it's really here that I kind of noticed. So with that, the chapter ends. And the next chapter is called something to do with purgatory, like Purgatory Life or something like that. So yeah, those are the two chapters. I really enjoyed it. I can't wait for Ban to come back. He's gonna receive an amazing buff. I can't wait for it. He's gonna be incredibly powerful. I don't think Esteros is gonna die. I think he's just gonna be possessed by the commandments. And if he does die, then it just makes it easier for Meliodas to regain the commandments that he's lost through Esteros. What else was there? I think Elizabeth will be saved in the nick of time by not Meliodas, but by King Sari-Al-Tamil and Derrieri. Actually, the major concern here is that Derrieri is going towards Esterossa, and if Esterossa is indeed possessed by the commandments, the commandments may have a will of their own, like we need to assimilate all the other commandments back together so we can become that whole, or half of the whole once again. So maybe Derrieri going is not such a great idea, because if Esterossa finds and he goes apeshit again, and which he is going apeshit again, he might be able to achieve, or he might be able to accumulate the fourth commandment in his kind of journey. So if he does absorb a fourth commandment, things are going to be going ape shit, because Meliodas at the moment has 5, Esterossa has 4, and then all we need is for Merlin to drop Esteros, that last commandment, and then GG. It's going to be 5v5. That would be amazing to see. So let me know what you guys thought of these chapters. Like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. It's a long review, I apologize for that, but 2 chapters, what can I do? So let me know what you guys thought. Like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I'll see you guys in a bit.